Harry Potter and the Cursed Child is one of the worst things I've ever read. This may sound like an exaggeration or clickbait, but let me assure you that I am being 100% serious. Knowing the general fan consensus, I was expecting to be disappointed after I read it, but I never thought I'd be actually angry and offended. The play is an absolute insult to the original Harry Potter series, and I am in utter shock and disbelief that J.K. Rowling could have allowed this to be published. It's just so disrespectful to the original series, breaking or forgetting established lore and ruining the characters we know and love. In fact, there is so much wrong with it that I'm slightly overwhelmed at the thought of where to begin this review or how to structure it. So after thinking it over, I think what would make the most sense would be to first go through some of the characters that were ruined one by one and discuss how and why I think they were ruined. And to be honest, I'd love to go through almost every character, but in the interest of time, I'll be restricting this to the few I can cover in this video. And perhaps if you guys like it, I can do a more detailed video in the future on the characters I didn't have time to do today. Then we'll be closing off by summarizing the faults in the entire premise of the story and how it contradicts the Harry Potter lore. The characters I'll be discussing today are Harry, Ron, and Voldemort. The biggest discussion will be around Harry himself, after which I expect the other characters will take relatively less time. So let's jump straight into the discussion for Harry. I wanted to start with Harry as he gets relatively the most screen time in the play, and as a result his characterization suffers the most. The Harry Potter in the Cursed Child feels like a twisted version of his original self. It was almost like I was reading about the actions of an imposter parading in Harry's skin. Key aspects of his character are not just altered, but fundamentally misunderstood, and I've pulled out what I think are the worst offenders. Point 1, Harry being portrayed as a bad father. Point 2, Harry's willingness to abuse his position of authority. And the third point, Harry's treatment and interaction with other characters, particularly his mentors. We'll be exploring each of these points with specific examples from both the Cursed Child and the original series. So, starting with the first point. A consistent theme in Harry Potter and the Cursed Child is the strange relationship between Harry and his son Albus. Albus is shown to be unpopular and struggling at school, and is also struggling to deal with the weight of his father's legacy. Harry, on the other hand, is unable to fully understand his son, and feels frustrated at their lack of connection and his inability to fix his son's struggles. This leads to the two of them frequently clashing, and at the start of Albus's third year, the tension between the two of them boils over and they have the following exchange. Harry, you know what? I'm done with being made responsible for your unhappiness. At least you've got a dad, because I didn't, okay? Albus, and you think that was unlucky? I don't. Harry, you wish me dead? Albus, no. I just wish you weren't my dad. Harry, well, there are times I wish you weren't my son. I cannot emphasize enough how terrible it is for Harry to say this to his son. This scene is one of the catalysts for Albus to steal the Time Turner and start meddling with time in the first place, kickstarting the main plot, and is also something that haunts him throughout the story, and rightfully so. And even if it was in the heat of the moment, I can't accept the Harry Potter we know saying something so cruel to his teenage son. And cruel is the word to describe it, and I hope I don't need to explain why it's terrible for a parent to say this to their child. In the original 7 books, Harry Potter is a character who is almost defined by his love for others. It's his heroic trait and his fatal flaw, a desperate yearning he has due to the sacrifice his parents made for him and being raised as an orphan in a fairly loveless family and without childhood friends. We see this throughout the entire series, emphasized over and over again. A great example of this is the Mirror of Erised. When Harry stumbles across it in the first book, he sees his family, primarily his parents, staring back at him. The Potters smiled and waved at Harry, and he stared hungrily back at them, his hands pressed flat against the glass as though he was hoping to fall right through it and reach them. He had a powerful kind of ache inside him, half joy, half terrible sadness. Look at the word choice here. J.K. Rowling really does a great job conveying Harry's desperate longing for his family. He is physically and metaphorically straining himself to reach them, to have any kind of connection to them. It's such an impactful passage, and reading it again I almost feel Harry's hunger myself. The moment is so key to his character that is brought up again more than 5 books later in The Half-Blood Prince, when Dumbledore is speaking to Harry about the prophecy. Despite your privileged insight into Voldemort's world, you have never been seduced by the dark arts, never, even for a second, shown the slightest desire to become one of Voldemort's followers. Of course I haven't, said Harry indignantly. He killed my mum and dad. You are protected, in short, by your ability to love. You remain pure of heart. Harry, have you any idea how few wizards could have seen what you saw in that mirror? Now, when Dumbledore speaks about the mirror here, granted he is speaking about Harry seeing the way to defeat Voldemort rather than his family, but it's all connected to Harry's capacity to love, and his connection to his family and his parents that shields him from being tempted by evil. And we see how Voldemort himself exploits this characteristic of Harry's. As I mentioned, it's both his strength and his fatal flaw, like when he lures him to the Ministry in the Order of the Phoenix to save Sirius. Voldemort knew already, of course, that Sirius was in the Order, and that you knew where he was, but Kreacher's information made him realize that the one person for whom you would go to any lengths to rescue was Sirius Black. There are countless other such examples throughout the books, which I don't have the time to cover in detail in this video, but moments like Harry going to the Chamber of Secrets to save Ginny without hesitation, and him fighting and arguing with Lupin when he abandons Tonks in the Deathly Hallows, and even the most obvious example where he sacrifices himself for everybody in the final battle at the end of the Deathly Hallows. These are all undeniably a part of who Harry is and is a direct result of the fierce love he has for those close to him. Now, what I'm trying to do here, and I'm hoping that it's coming across, is really hammer home the contrast between this Harry, the Harry who would sacrifice anything without hesitation, go to any lengths to protect and save the people he cares about, and the Harry in The Cursed Child who told his own son that he didn't want him, and who was okay with him leaving on the train to Hogwarts believing that. Can you imagine this Harry turning around and arguing with Lupin about abandoning his own son, Teddy? I could honestly keep going with this, but for the sake of time, let's move on to the second point, Harry's abuse of authority. So, in the play, upon deciding that Albus's friend, who is Draco Malfoy's son, is a bad influence on him, he decides to ban Albus from seeing him. I know I said I'd be moving on from the first point, but I can't resist showing a quick quote here. Harry, I thought for a long time I wasn't a good enough dad for you because you didn't like me. It's only now I realize that I don't need you to like me, I need you to obey me. I'm trying to remain focused here, and I think this speaks for itself, so let's instead move on to the subsequent conversation Harry has with McGonagall. So in this scene, Harry is ordering McGonagall to keep Albus away from Scorpius, his friend, and he threatens her as follows. Harry, then I will come down on this school as hard as I can, using the full force of the Ministry. Is that understood? Normally I show specific quotes to highlight things that are contrary to a character, but this is so egregious it's almost difficult to condense the evidence against it. Not only has Harry frequently been let down by many of the adults in his life, him, his friends, and his supporters all suffered directly at the hands of the Ministry in the original series. The entire book of the Order of the Phoenix is how the Ministry interferes at Hogwarts, and how they abuse their power and influence to discredit Harry and torment him. He's placed directly at odds with Umbridge, a Ministry representative, for the majority of the book, a book in which she not only forces him to write in a quill that cuts him and takes blood from him, but she also almost uses the unforgivable torture curse on him, Crucio. This entire book is the angriest we ever see Harry, as he's constantly grappling with feelings of rage and frustration. The Ministry throughout most of the series is largely shown to be incompetent, and this contributes to Harry's mistrust of authority. When we see the new Minister Rufus approach Harry throughout the Half-Blood Prince to try and garner his support for the Ministry, only to be soundly rejected. I haven't forgotten, Minister. He raised his right fist, there shining white on the back of his cold hand, with the scars which Dolores Umbridge had forced him to carve into his own flesh. I must not tell lies. I don't remember you rushing to my defense when I was trying to tell everyone Voldemort was back. The Ministry wasn't so keen to be pals last year. Again, it's absolutely unbelievable that the boy who suffered firsthand the consequences of the abuse of power and meddling by the Ministry of Magic would then in turn threaten to do the exact same thing to the school he loves. Hogwarts was the first and best home he had ever known. He and Voldemort and Snape, the abandoned boys, had all found home here. Now, to conclude our discussion on Harry, I want to finally very quickly talk through the final point. Harry's treatment of other characters, and in this case, and again in the interest of time, how he treats Professor McGonagall and Dumbledore. In the same scene when Harry is telling McGonagall to keep tabs on his son Albus, he also says this to her. Harry, Albus didn't like me before. He might not like me again, but he will be safe. With the greatest respect, Minerva, you don't have children. Again, this is highly offensive to the original character of Harry, who always treated McGonagall with the greatest of respect. And while she's not exactly a major character, the original series does make clear the affection Harry has for her. Why would Harry Potter try to get inside Ravenclaw Tower? Potter belongs in my house. Beneath the disbelief and anger, Harry heard a little strain of pride in her voice. An affection for Minerva McGonagall gushed up inside him, and then later in that same chapter, and he spat in her face. Harry pulled the cloak off himself, raised his wand and said, "You shouldn't have done that." As Amicus spun around, Harry shouted, "Crucio." It should go without saying that this scene alone shows how much Harry cares for McGonagall, whereas the way he treats her in The Cursed Child is uncharacteristically harsh and dismissive, and also doesn't make sense considering how many students and children McGonagall has looked after and indirectly raised in her capacity as a teacher who has taught at Hogwarts for decades. It should also be noted that the only other time Harry uses Crucio in the series is when he's trying to curse Bellatrix after she murders Sirius. Harry also appears to be at odds with Dumbledore again in this play. Harry, go, leave. I don't want you here. I don't need you. You were absent every time it really counted. And then later on, and I have proved as bad a father to him as you were to me. It's very odd to see Harry rehashing his resentment at Dumbledore. This was definitely a prominent theme throughout the Deathly Hallows book, but they had reconciled by the end, and Harry had seemed to come to an understanding and acceptance of Dumbledore. It's therefore frustrating to see the regression of this character development as they retread the same conflict we've already read about. There are other instances of Harry treating characters poorly, or in ways not congruent with his original, previous characterization, but I think by now you've hopefully seen for yourself the flaws in his characterization in The Cursed Child, and how in many ways Harry was just character assassinated. So let's move on to the next character that I want to talk about, which is Ron Weasley. And as I mentioned, Ron and Voldemort will take much less time to discuss than Harry. Now, the problems with Ron can be summarized in a single line. He's reduced to being the comedic sidekick. All his flair, personality, and complexity are largely ignored or stripped away. And it's a shame because I feel like this script takes a lot of cues from the movie version of Ron rather than his original book version. In the books, the trio of Harry, Ron, and Hermione actually feels balanced, with each of them bringing their own strengths and weaknesses to the table. Ron is Harry's closest friend and is deeply loyal to him. He's the first friend Harry ever made, the one who was taken in the Goblet of Fire as the thing that Harry would miss the most. And time again, he shows his bravery and his strength of character. There's a particular scene in The Prisoner of Azkaban, which I think is a great testament to Ron's character, when the trio have been ambushed by Sirius Black and believe he's there to kill Harry. "No, Harry," Hermione gasped in a petrified whisper. Ron, however, spoke to Black. "If you want to kill Harry, you'll have to kill us too," he said fiercely, though the effort of standing up had drained him of still more colour, and he swayed slightly as he spoke. And for those of you who don't remember, Ron's leg is actually broken in this scene. And again, another quote from the Deathly Hallows. Ron sat watching her, and Harry looked from one to the other, unable to say anything. The measures they had taken to protect their families made him realise, more than anything else could have done, that they were really going to come with him and that they knew exactly how dangerous that would be. He wanted to tell them what that meant to him, but he simply could not find words important enough. And the final quote for this is when Harry and Ron reunite after their worst fight in the series in the Deathly Hallows. Ron's ears turned bright red and he became engrossed in a tuft of grass at his feet, which he prodded with his toe. "He must have known I'd run out on you." "No," Harry corrected him. "He must have known you'd always want to come back." If we contrast this with The Cursed Child, we see how the script unforgivably treats Ron like a buffoon time and time again. In one of the alternate timelines in the story, Ron and Hermione are rebel fighters in hiding, and this is how Ron responds to a potential intruder. Ron: "Snape, a royal visit," and he sees Scorpius and is immediately alarmed. What's he doing here? He fumbles out his wand. "I'm armed and entirely dangerous and seriously advise you." He realizes his wand is around the wrong way and turns it right. This is meant to be a serious scene, a dark timeline where Voldemort has won and Harry is dead. The rebels are in hiding and almost entirely without hope. A known supporter of Voldemort's has found his way to their secret hideout, and we have a scene where Ron points his wand the wrong way round. This completely diminishes and disrespects Ron's character by making him make such a foolish mistake. This is Marvel levels of needless, cheesy humour, and is totally unnecessary other than trying to get a cheap laugh from the audience. Additionally, Ron seems to be constantly characterized as a prankster in this play, more like the twins Fred and George, which further dilutes his established personality from the original series, where he never plays a single prank. "Harry, Ron sent this." Albus: "Okay, a love potion. Okay." "Harry, I think it's a joke about..." I don't know what. Lily got farting gnomes. James got a comb that made his hair turn a shade of pink. Ron, well, Ron's Ron, you know. Harry even sounds exasperated with Ron in this scene, and perhaps slightly dismissive. If you hadn't read the original series, you'd have no sense of the depth of their friendship and the things they've been through together. Ron never has a chance to display his courage or loyalty. He simply bumbles around in the few scenes he appears in and contributes almost nothing to the story. To close off with Ron, we see in another alternate timeline that he's married to Padma and has become a timid pushover. Rum. That's why I'm here, of course. Panju. He's in trouble again. I just wanted to send a howler, but Padma insisted I come in person. I don't know why. Just laughs at me. Ron. Anyway, better go, before I'm sent a howler myself. He stumbles on, not even an inch of the man he was. One of the defining traits of Ron in the books is how passionate and emotional he can be, a trait that both works for and against him, much like Harry's love for others and willingness to self-sacrifice. As I said, all Ron's depth and complexity is stripped away from him in The Cursed Child, leaving him a literal husk of what he once was. Look in the original series how he treats Padma at the Yule Ball. Ron watched her go with a mixture of anger and satisfaction on his face. Are you going to ask me to dance at all? Padma asked him. No, said Ron, still glaring after Hermione. It's obviously too long to share here, but I strongly encourage anyone who doesn't remember the chapter that well to read it in its entirety. It's not Ron at his best in terms of friendship, but what it completely captures is his passion and his emotional nature. He was never somebody who was pushed around in the books. He always spoke his mind and spoke it freely, even when others wouldn't like what he had to say, to the point where Hermione even frequently told him off for not being sensitive enough to others. And again, this is in sharp contrast to the broken, diminished man we see in The Cursed Child, who does not seem to be respected by either his wife or child, and all this because he apparently didn't marry Hermione, which again reduces his character and makes it seem like he's totally dependent on Hermione in order to become a good or respected person. He's unable to stand on his own 2 feet. This is a grave disservice to his character. A character which sadly was also mistreated by the movies and now again with The Cursed Child. Now, the final character I want to discuss in this section is Voldemort. I considered merging this into the conclusion, but I decided to separate it out just to really highlight how nonsensical the character of Delphi is. The twist reveal in this story is that Voldemort had a child with Bellatrix, the girl named Delphi, and I really cannot stress enough how little sense it makes for Voldemort, the wizard who was trying to live forever and who believed he would live forever, who neither understood nor craved human love or affection, to have a daughter, and to not only have a daughter, but have a daughter who he apparently taught his own prized magical secrets to, such as the ability to fly. Again, the whole point of Voldemort as a character is that he physically cannot understand the concept of love, and this is what ultimately leads to his downfall. In fact, with the way his physical body is described after his resurrection in the Goblet of Fire, I'm not even sure he'd be capable of having a child. It's really a total misreading of Voldemort's character to believe for one moment he would be interested in having intimate relations with another person, much less having an actual child and teaching her his secrets. Look at this quote from Dumbledore about Voldemort. He did not want help or companionship on his trip to Diagon Alley. He preferred to operate alone. The adult Voldemort is the same. You will hear many of his Death Eaters claiming they are in his confidence, that they alone are close to him, even understand him. They are deluded. Lord Voldemort has never had a friend, nor do I believe he has ever wanted one. The irony here is that this quote could almost be directly speaking to Bellatrix, who was clearly quite obsessed with Voldemort and possibly even desired him, but it's clearly one-sided, as Voldemort was more likely to see Bellatrix as a loyal and dedicated servant rather than a romantic partner or an equal. So that wraps up the first section of talking about individual characters throughout the story, and I hope by going through these characters you can see just how mischaracterized they were and how really disrespectful the writing is to them. As I said, I wish I had more time to go through some of the other characters. The ones that really come to mind are Hermione, Cedric and Dumbledore, who are all similarly really misportrayed in The Cursed Child, but they wouldn't fit into this video unfortunately. However, if you guys like this video so far and you want to see a discussion on these characters that I couldn't get to, just let me know. I'm definitely interested in making a part 2. But now on to the second segment, which is really talking about the whole premise of the story and the writing. And What I wanted to say here is that the disrespect for the characters extends to the entire premise of the story and the contradictions in the writing itself. The most glaring problem is the misuse of time travel in this play. In The Prisoner of Azkaban, we are introduced to time travel as a closed loop. Actions taken by characters traveling back in time were already a part of the timeline. As we see with Harry and Hermione, that going back in time didn't change anything at all really. For example, Harry saving himself from the Dementors, where he had already saved himself, and him going back didn't actually change anything. However, the Cursed Child breaks this established rule and allows characters to alter the past significantly, completely altering the timeline. Then, aside from this major problem, there's lots of little things which don't make sense. For example, Delphi's handling of the Time Turner. Her whole plan is to use the Time Turner to prevent Voldemort's defeat, but instead of taking it immediately from Albus and Scorpius, she for some reason allows them to use it for their own reasons, basically going on side quests, despite clearly being powerful enough to take it by force from the both of them. In fact, if they hadn't fought to owl her at the end of the play, they would have ended up destroying the Time Turner after fixing the timeline, without Delphi getting the chance to do anything. Then other key contradictions to the original series, such as why can Delphi, Albus and Scorpius see the Potters back in the past when they haven't been told the secret by the Secret Keeper, which is a huge plot point in the books and is the whole reason Sirius went to Azkaban in the first place, as the Secret Keeper is the only one who can give up the location of those he is protecting. Then we have the prophecy that Delphi is following, which is just completely thrown into the plot and barely mentioned, and we have no idea who made this prophecy or where it came from or how Delphi heard it. And then why can't Delphi simply force Albus to do what she wants, casting Imperio? Apparently the prophecies told her not to do it, but this just reads like the writers throwing this in because they knew Imperio would have ended the story there. And the final couple of examples to quickly highlight in this video are Harry's scar hurting him again, despite the Horcrux within him being destroyed, and the complete and total Deus Ex Machina of Draco Malfoy conveniently having another super time turner just hidden away and only mentioned when it's convenient to the plot. If these time turners with the potential to completely alter the timeline are so easy to create, then the world of Harry Potter would be a mess, as every dark wizard would be constantly traveling back in time and changing things for their own benefit. So, in conclusion, Harry Potter and the Cursed Child is a horrible, horrible addition to the Harry Potter lore. It really disrespects the writing of the original series, with the narrative, the established lore, and the characters themselves. It reads as though it was written by someone with very little care for the original series. All the original characters are written in a much worse light, with their positive qualities stripped away compared to the books. I can only hope, if there are future spin-off series from Harry Potter, that they treat the series and characters with the respect they deserve. As always, if you've listened this far, thank you very much for listening. I know this was a bit of a longer video today, but there was really just a lot to talk about with this. I'd really like to hear from you guys what your opinions are, whether you agree with me or disagree with me. So definitely leave a comment and I'll do my best to get back to you. Thank you for watching.